And we're going to start off this session with four short 5-minute talks, speaking about enablers of action around our oceans, enablers of sustainable blue economies. And they're just going to have them one after another. This is new information, it's future looking, and it's to get you all thinking before we then go into our final panel session. So I'm going to invite up our first speaker, who is Gerard McCarthy from Maynooth University. Come ahead, Gerard, you're very welcome. And Gerard is going to give us a 5-minute update on climate science. So we all take off into this last panel on the same level of information. Thank you, Gerard, you're very welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, so I have 5 minutes to tell you about climate science.
All of climate science in 5 minutes.
So best of luck to you as well. So my name is Gerard McCarthy. I'll just give it a few minutes there for the slides to come up. My name is Gerard McCarthy. I work in ICRIS, which is the Irish Climate Analysis and Research Unit, based in the Department of Geography in Maynooth University. And I'm an oceanographer. More specifically, I'm an observational physical oceanographer. And the best part of my job is that I get to go to sea. And I get to go to some pretty glamorous locations. That's me over there in Cork Harbour last November, teaching our MSc in climate change. But I spent a lot of time working between the Canary Islands and the Bahamas, island regions that are at a really important juncture in the ocean for understanding ocean currents and changing ocean currents, working on ships such as the James Cook and the Discovery. So for those of you wondering which one the RS Discovery is in the top picture, that's it over there in the corner. So as we've heard today, size is quite a relative thing when you're talking about the ocean. So I'm going to start off quite a long way from here. I'm going to start off in the equatorial Pacific. So what you're looking at there is an animation of El Nino. So this is the surface of the ocean that's flashing red and blue every so often. When it flashes red, that's an El Nino. When it flashes blue, that's a La Nina. El Nino is one of the better understood climate phenomena, and we know that it has very linked effects all the way around the globe. Now, it's a coupled phenomena, which means that the ocean is doing a dance at the same time as the surface and as the climate. So the ocean bounces up and down in concert with the surface. El Nino has some very important climate effects. Just highlighting one here, when El Nino occurs, it rains particularly heavy in certain parts of Peru. And this can have very serious consequences for Peruvian agriculture. The inset here shows typical flooding in the Piura region of Peru, in northern Peru, which is a heavily agricultural part of Peru. But because we understand El Nino relatively well, an index-based insurance product has been developed that pays out when sea surface temperatures hit a certain point. So this is something that it's not an insurance that pays out after the disaster has happened, after it's too late, after the effects are already here. But by understanding the ocean dynamics and understanding its effect on climate, we can prepare and mitigate. And Secretary Kerry mentioned this earlier, that mitigation and adaptation are no longer options. These are something that we have to do in dealing with a changing climate now. Okay. So I don't work in the equatorial Pacific. I'm much more concerned with the North Atlantic. And some of our visiting guests from subtropical and tropical island states might be surprised to hear that Ireland actually has a very mild climate. So the picture here, the inset, shows palm trees growing in Sligo. So Sligo is in the northwest coast of Ireland, and it's at a latitude of about 54 degrees north. And when we say it's mild, what we mean is that relative to the latitude, if you were to look at 54 degrees south, it would take you to the sub-Antarctic island of South Georgia. So here's a picture of the church in Verbruggen, which you can see the snowscapes behind it. So, South Georgia is a glaciated island and is very different from the kind of climate we have here. Now, we know the reason for the difference is to do with the ocean, and in particular to do with the ocean currents that we get, particular to the North Atlantic. In the North Atlantic, we are benefiting majorly from the system of ocean currents that starts off with the Gulf Stream from the coast of America, travels across the Atlantic as the North Atlantic current, and can be traced all the way up past Norway. You can see a warm tongue of warm colours stretching all the way up past Norway. Now, we know that that's important, but not only is it important, it's also predictable. So the study that I'm highlighting here was able to trace warm thermal anomalies traveling all the way across the Atlantic from numbers 1 all the way up to number 9. Now, that predictability allows you to understand what's going to happen on your climate on a time period of 5 to 10 years, which is a great advantage if you're involved in governance, if you're concerned about climate action, you're dealing with mitigation. To have higher certainty on this timescales is great, and that comes from the ocean. Now, just looking to the future, here are a range of temperature responses in the globe that we expect going forward. The warm colours mean hot, and we can see that definitely looking into the window of 2080 to 2100, that we expect a much, much warmer world. However, that is not the only scenario that might manifest itself. We can see that certain times, if the ocean currents collapse, you might actually get a cooling in the North Atlantic. That would have very important consequences for Ireland. And it could mean that we have a very different future from a lot of the rest of the world. Now, this cooling doesn't mean that it would naturally offset what's going to happen with the warming elsewhere, and it could have some pretty nasty consequences in terms of storminess. However, the point that we would make is that a different future doesn't necessarily mean a more uncertain future. We're working as part of the A4 project for the Gaelgoers here. It's the Eoghan Éiread agus Athrú Atlantic project from 2019 to 2024, funded by the Marine Institute and the European Regional Development Fund, looking at first observing the changing Atlantic currents. That's what I'll be doing. And we've recruited Dr. Andre Dusterhouse from the University of Hamburg, who's going to bring the field of decadal climate prediction to Ireland. And we hope that by improving our observations of the ocean and improving our understanding and the implications for decadal climate prediction, that we'll be able to provide that kind of information to governance that really is important for making knowledge-based decisions. Thank you.
I'm really delighted that Gerard is going to be working on ocean currents, because my favourite thing to do is swim in the sea year-round, and if the sea gets any colder, I won't be able to do that. So constant monitoring, and if you could turn the temperature up just a touch, but not enough to be anyway dangerous, that'd be great. Next we're going to have Koen Verbruggen from the Geological Survey of Ireland, filling us in a little bit about what lies under the water. Thank you.
Okay, so I've got 5 minutes to tell you about 20 years of a project, so brace yourselves. Luckily, Peter ran through a video early on showing the highlights of the seabed mapping, how large the project is. So all I've got to do first is add in a few extra logos, because success has many fathers. It's a Government of Ireland programme. Currently the department is Communications, Climate Action and Environment. That changes every election. We're the Geological Survey, so we're the project co-partners along with the Marine Institute. And the programme is now called Infomar. The two project managers are Sean Cullen in GSI, Tommy Fury in MI. I'm just stealing their thunder. You've seen this. This is the real map of Ireland. It's on a building outside, and it's been a really successful way to talk about Ireland's extent offshore, the fact that it's 10 times our onshore territory. We really like this map, which is the real map of Ireland. It's the fact that we've actually gone out in ships, good weather and bad, and mapped almost all of it. There's about 70,000 square kilometres left to do, and we should finish it. Well, we have to finish it by 2026. But interestingly, the deeper water was the cheaper bit, and the easier bit to map. It's the shallow water that's killing us. When we're finished, and even when we finished the first phase of it, it was the largest civilian seabed map of the world, partly because we just don't know how much the military actually map. Interestingly, and following into the next talk, it was really unusual that we carried out a cost-benefit analysis of a major scientific endeavour like this, and it returned a positive result. Always a good idea when you commission a CBA. I can recommend PwC. But it returned between 4 and 6 times the cost. That was back in 2008. Since then, and since these conferences have kicked off, since SEMRU have started to work out the actual value of the ocean economy and it's increased, those numbers have actually increased, because a small incremental addition to any of those sectors is a multiplier effect. This project costs $4 million a year, and you can see the figures yourself in the report that came out today for the size of the ocean economy we have in Ireland. The key points are it's a long-term project, and it's been a long-term commitment right through, even through the fiscal crash, where we got a 25% cut of our budget, but the project was kept on track. It's in two phases, the deep water phase, which cost €32 million, and now the shallow water, shelf and coastal, which is going to cost almost 3 times as much just because it's that much harder to map. Like I said, a positive CBA, which has been reviewed twice, and that led to a decision at the end of last year to fund this to completion. So the Irish government have committed to complete this mapping out to 2026, and they're going to get it done. Well, we're going to get it done. It's a national infrastructure. It's included in NDP. It's referred to in the documents you got today about harnessing our ocean wealth and Project Ireland, our national development plan now. And it is a world-leading project. We were told earlier to stand up and be proud about things we're successful at. This is something we are proud of, and it's something we are successful at. It's an international exemplar. And importantly, the project is carried out, all the data is available free and online, and it supports all the different marine sectors, so it's available for use. It was carried out, like I said, in a few phases, originally in 1996 by a Petroleum Affairs Division, just to outline the edge of the shelf for UNCLOS delimitation exercises, and I'm thankfully not going to talk about Rockall, but it was about the definition of where our continental shelf extended to, and therefore the area we could outline as a territorial claim. The next phase of it was the National Seabed Survey from 1999 to 2005, which effectively mapped all of our waters over 200-metre water depth, so everything from the edge of the shelf outwards. And the next phase then was rebranded and named as Infomar, as a collaboration joint venture between the Marine Institute and Geological Survey, and set out in 2 phases to map first the priority basin areas and then the remaining waters. So the Seabed Survey, the deep water, was essentially using large ships, multi-beam echo sounders, ships of opportunity, a couple of ships on contract, and as the project went on, the Marine Institute's vessels came on board, first the Voyager and then the Explorer, which didn't exist, don't forget, when this project started. That said, Infomar then was focused on 26 priority bays and areas, the most valuable waters we had, to try and get them properly mapped for all of the things they could feed into. And as well as the data acquisition, there was a strong focus on exchange and integration and value-added exploitation, hugely helped by the decision in 2007 to make all of our digital data free and online, the FAIR principles that are now championed globally. As well as carrying out the mapping and training up the people, we support projects through research calls, through partnering, and we've supported over 100 projects. When we started Infomar, the Geological Survey didn't have any vessels. This is now a picture of the fleet. Well, there's 2 vessels missing from this. So we had to build inshore capacity and build an inshore fleet, learn how to man it, run it, and deliver the data, and then more recently, learn how to use drones and even try to get them to come back to you. It's another story, it takes longer. The second phase of the project is really just completion of the mapping, or as we said, delivering on the ambition. And the key part there has been really communicating the message. This thing's been going on in the background around the country, and now that we're in the inshore areas, working with inshore communities. We mentioned about the fishermen. When we're based in harbours, we work with the local RNLI, the local Coast Guard, the local fishermen, to make sure they know about it. But go on the website, infomar.ie, have a look at it, follow us on Twitter at Follow the Boats. We get involved in open days. The Curie was out here for the weekend. We try and promote the project as much as we can. Like I said, the key applications, you wouldn't build something on land without having a map. So why do we think we can do it offshore without accurate mapping? When you've got the accurate mapping, it feeds into everything else. It improves your decision making. It de-risks your project. This is just a range of the different applications. The one that gets all of the publicity is the shipwrecks. Like I say, it's less than 5% of what we do and 95% of our publicity. I can't come to Cork without showing an image of the Lusitania, the most famous shipwreck in Irish waters, which brought the US into the First World War. It also supports international initiatives, the European initiative EMODNet, European Marine Observation and Data Network, both on the geology, the bathymetry, and the network side of things, AORA, which has been mentioned already, and most recently you may have heard of the Xprize competition to come up with autonomous ways of mapping the seabed. Well, the winners of that competition included, on your left-hand side, Aileen Bowen, so a young geologist who came out of Trinity College, worked with us for 2 years. We taught her how to be a marine surveyor. She went off to the States and came back as a prize winner on this project. So this is just typical of the added value that happens and the other consequences of doing the project. The other applications, everything from flood protection, fisheries, the obvious one, the R&D side of it, search and rescue, unfortunately or fortunately, We have been called to assist in cases of search and rescue. Touch wood, this is all plastic, interestingly. Not this year, but because we have these skills, these expertise and this equipment, we can assist with that as well. And coastal change and climate now. Where people see the interaction of coastal change, where people see the interaction of climate is often at the coast, and that's where we're working now. We've mapped the seabed, we're mapping in onto the coast, and we're working extensively in that area in the climate space. This includes working on EO data, satellite data sponsored by in projects with the European Space Agency, and coming back again to the UNCLOS definitions, supporting projects like redefining your baselines. I mentioned about baselines earlier, your nautical mile limits. So actually going out 2 years ago with the Air Corps, the Naval Service, and our Ordnance Survey to remap in our baselines accurately. Another example of this is where we've integrated projects from air marine mapping on one side and the drone work we do, working with the archaeologists, including Tara's sister Linda, who works with the Discovery Programme, on an interreg project between Ireland and Wales, mapping our coastline, mapping the heritage that's affected by the climate change, and seeing how best, not to preserve it, but how best to record it, to monitor it, to see the effects, and to make sure we benefit from all of this latest technology that we have. So in closing, the Irish Seabed Mapping Project, it's a project, if you're Irish, you should be proud of. It's a national infrastructure, and from an international point of view, it's an exemplar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Koen. Thank you. Thank you. I even have a pen from the Cherish Project in my hand all day, so there you go, it's all connected. Next up, we have Owen Linehan. Owen, you're welcome, from PwC, who's going to talk about financing blue economy projects. Owen, you're very welcome.
There we go. Two very interesting presentations there. Just to switch the narrative a little from science to finance, which is a matter close to our hearts in PwC and for our clients, and to talk to you briefly about a new assistance platform in the EU known as the Blue Economy Assistance Platform, which PwC is now leading out on for the European Commission. Just to go back a little, it has long been recognised that our coasts and our oceans can foster regional development and technological innovation within the 28 member states. And I think recent estimates put it at 3.5 million people that are actually working in the blue economy within those member states. Yet for many startups, scale-ups and SME businesses, they face a couple of significant challenges, and two which we'll touch on today. The first being in transferring research knowledge and capability that they've built into business ventures, and then secondly, accessing the finance to scale up their operations. And with that in mind, the investment plan for Europe, which was launched back in 2014, focused on the fact that innovation was a key enabler for the blue economy and also on removing those very obstacles. And it has led to, in April, the establishment of the Blue Economy Assistance Platform. Now, the purpose of that platform is twofold. It's one, to increase investment readiness within those businesses in the blue economy, and secondly, to facilitate investment in them from both public and private sources. PwC, as I mentioned, are leading out in this initiative over the next 3 years, and it involves a collaboration between our Greek, Portuguese and Irish practices led by our EU services team in Luxembourg. So just to touch on a number of the connected activities within the platform. At its heart is an initiative will be the establishment of an investment and innovation community. And the objective of this community is to facilitate cooperation and information exchange between those businesses, investors, and indeed to facilitate matchmaking between them. It will allow for engagement of not only investors and businesses, but all of the other people that have a contribution to make to the agenda, including maritime clusters, business accelerators, coaches. Over the next number of months to August, we will be involved in setting up, animating and promoting that new community within the 28 member states. To support the development of the community, there will be a number of events run throughout the 28 member states. The key event will be the annual Blue Invest Day, which is really a matchmaking event between investors and investable businesses in the blue economy. And then secondly, a number of regional events, 3 per year. These will be thematic in nature, and there's one earmark for Cork in 2020 to coincide with European Maritime Day. Just to touch briefly on a couple of the other connected activities, there will be a support service there that will assist SMEs in their investment readiness. It will focus on a needs basis on the areas within their business to ensure that they can scale and that they will appeal to the investor community. And then lastly, an investment platform. That'll be a key feature of the initiative. PwC are supporting on the legal, technical and financial setup of the platform and the identification of investors to participate in it. As part of that, we will be maintaining and expanding a project pipeline of potentially investable and innovative blue economy businesses, which will ultimately constitute the basis for the investment platform. So just to finish really on the value proposition of all this, for businesses in the blue economy, scale-up startups, SMEs, they'll find that they'll have access to world-class professionals, services and experts, access to investor networks and, generally speaking, expanded investment potential. For investors, access to relevant deal flow, an opportunity to shape this community of interest and also to participate in a formal investment platform. And for the ecosystem itself, it should lead to greater connection between businesses and investors and knowledge exchange to support the success of the industry. It's in its infancy, but if you would like to find out more about the platform or feel like you have a contribution to make to it, you can scan the QR code there, or indeed the QR code is available at our stall just inside the front door. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Eoghan. Thank you. Thank you very much, Eoghan. That was really interesting. Not half as scary as your job title, which is forensic accountant, which would make you be quite scared of him, but no need. Our last speaker is Yvonne Shields O'Connor from the Commissioners of Irish Lights, and she is going to talk to us about Ireland's great and oh so beautiful lighthouses. Yvonne, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be here, and it's particularly great to be able to congratulate all our colleagues on such a fantastic event today and on Seafest over the last couple of days. As someone who's been involved in the marine sector for over 25 years, it's wonderful to see the amazing energy and the focus now on our marine resources in Ireland and, of course, internationally, and to hear about the challenges and the opportunities and ambitions of our colleagues in the small developing island nations. My message this afternoon is very simple. It's really based on our experience in Irish Lights of the power and the potential of working together in partnership across the public, the private, and in particular the community sector to unlock the potential of some of our marine resources, and in our case, our marine heritage assets. With the arrival of new technology in our business in Irish Lights, we found ourselves with a problem. And that problem was an excess of property, in particular buildings, over and above what we require today to do our core job. Working together with public bodies, communities and the private sector in innovative collaborative partnerships, we've been able to maintain our core business in our lighthouses, while at the same time opening them up to the public and creating new social enterprises, providing jobs and generating revenue for coastal communities. The project is called the Great Lighthouses of Ireland Initiative, and this short film will tell you its story.
They are relics from a bygone age. Yet we depend on them for our survival today. They are built in some of the most beautiful locations in Ireland, and in some of the most treacherous. They are feats of astonishing engineering and technology, as well as places of beauty and mystery. They have witnessed history, and they are shelters from the storm. They are great lighthouses of Ireland.
As an island nation, Ireland is critically dependent on its relationship with the sea. 95% of all of our trade and over 4.5 million passengers arrive by sea every year. We have 12,000 fishing vessels, a vibrant tourism and leisure sector, and an emerging offshore energy sector. Therefore, it is obvious that safety and safe navigation are fundamental when we talk about harnessing our ocean wealth. Irish Lights promotes safe navigation, delivered by a mix of aids to navigation, including physical aids, such as lighthouses and buoys, electronic and satellite systems. All play a crucial role, nationally and internationally, in protecting lives, property and the environment at sea. Technology and innovation are having a major impact on the services that we provide, making it a very exciting and technologically challenging time to be in the business of safe navigation. At the same time as we're embarking and embracing on delivering next generation technologies, part of our strategy is to continue to protect and harness our heritage assets, such as our lighthouses, opening them up to the public and extending their use for tourism and local economic development.
Great Lighthouses of Ireland is an exciting and successful initiative developed and supported by Irish Lights. Featuring 13 iconic lighthouse locations managed by 10 independent partners spread right around the island of Ireland, north and south. It delivers for all parties involved through a range of direct and indirect benefits. For Irish Lights, it delivers on our strategic objective to positively impact on coastal communities. For the coastal communities, it delivers through job creation and generating local economic activity. And for the tourism agencies, it provides an attractive product proposition to market Ireland to both domestic and international visitors.
It's something that people should know about, it's something that people should experience. And not just because they are, I feel it because I'm completely biased, but they're amazing buildings to be in, they're fantastic locations. You would never find yourself in these places experiencing the amazing scenery and have the opportunity to stay there or to actually go up and get into a lighthouse on any normal day.
Well, this could be a real attractor for the whole island. It ties everything together. The coast is one of our major experiences and we think it's great.
The accommodation is going a bomb. We've gone from very few visitors to almost 70,000 visitors. One of the main benefits is directly. People are earning good money down here and they're enjoying the work, and it's been extremely successful, and we hope that we up here will prove that they made the right decision. The story is only beginning.
The Great Lighthouses of Ireland initiative allows us to positively impact on coastal communities and the wider public by developing these spectacular heritage properties, ensuring their protection and sustainable use into the future. These projects are not for the faint-hearted. They take a lot of ongoing hard work and investment by community groups, often assisted by public bodies and local authorities. And I really would like to pay tribute to the wonderful work and dedication of all the people and communities involved in this project right around the coast. Lighthouses are places of great beauty and endless fascination. With the help of the communities who are their custodians, we are really excited about this new chapter in their remarkable story.
I hope that qualifies as a good news story.
I just find our lighthouses so emotive. Thank you. I mean, if you don't want to go and visit and stay in a lighthouse after that, I just think they're fabulous symbols of how buildings connect us to the ocean, connect us to the stories of the people that have lived and worked in those lighthouses. They're just a great asset for us nationally. Now I would like to welcome our Ambassador Byrne Nason, Ireland's permanent representative to the UN, to welcome our two leaders, tomorrow's leaders today, I would say, they are already leading, they're already making their voices heard, but they are certainly going to be our leaders of tomorrow. Ambassador, would you like to come up and then welcome your two leaders up to the stage as well? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Tara. I'll be very brief because the whole point of the exercise is that we're facilitating young voices. Many of you in the audience, certainly my colleagues from New York, are well aware that Ireland and the Marshall Islands will be leading in September at the Secretary General's major conference on climate action in the mobilisation, the public mobilisation, particularly youth mobilisation, part of the climate action that we give the highest, I can say, priority to. So we're thrilled to be working with Ambassador Matlin, who's here today and who was with me this morning as we had over an hour with Irish youth representatives, and I think I can see some of you out there in the audience still. We had an excellent discussion led by our two youth ambassadors, by Alicia and Selina. I hope they're going to give you a flavour of the extraordinary discussion. And right in the middle of the discussion, the Secretary of State Kerry and Tánaiste the Simon Coveney came, and I have to tell you that the youth representatives really put them through their paces. So I think you'll get a little flavour of that as well. So I'd like to welcome Selina and Alicia to the stage.
You can stand in the middle of the stage, stand there.
Yeah, up to you. Yahweh, good afternoon. Thank you. My name is Selina Neirok. I am from the Marshall Islands. I am a 21-year-old climate warrior. I've been active in this for quite a while now. So I was invited here to give a message to our audience here and also our youth up there who came today to have a discussion with us, as Ambassador Geraldine has just mentioned. Two of the things that I took out of that conversation. Throughout this conference that has been happening, a lot of our leaders, many have stood up here and mentioned how we youths are the future leaders. And I would like us to change that narrative. Because saying we are the future leaders undermine the work that we youths are doing today. We're no longer future leaders, we're already living in the present right now, and all of us are doing actions in each of our communities, each of the places that we are living in, interacting with those around us in order to mobilize what we have to make concrete actions all over the world. So we're not future leaders, we are the present leaders right now, as you are our present leaders right now. You are our political leaders as we are your civil leaders. And we need to get rid of that narrative, because this is not a future problem anymore, this is not a mess. You talk about the mess that us, the younger generations, have to inherit. We're already here. You're living through this mess. We are living through your mess. And the ball has just been tossed around whose fault it is and whose fault is it not. We already know whose fault it is. Right now, we youth came together to share the message that we want concrete actions from our leaders, from you. We're from the grassroots. We're on the grassroots. We are doing what we can here. But you are political leaders who have worked long years tirelessly in this. You are experts at what you're doing. You know all the political lingos and whatnot that you have to be careful about. So we're doing what we can, and we're demanding, we're not asking, we're demanding that you do what you can do best. Which leads on to one of our youths mentioned how youth is not as inclusive in the discussions that we have. And not just that, but actions that were promised by countries are not being put forth, they're not being carried through as they should be, as had been promised. And that needs to be changed, because You made the promise, we are the one living through this mess along with you, and we all need to work together. This is a symbiotic relationship. You give, I give. We don't just take. We have to give. And that is something that, coming from the Marshall Islands and a lot of small island nations have, our culture is about giving. And I think it is important that we share that value with the rest of the world. This culture, this tradition of giving what we have to those who do not have it. And those who do not have it, give what we do not have. And we are very aware, we do not understand why, but we are aware that there are internal and external factors that influences political leaders to not carry forth with what they had promised, maybe through monetary compensation, whatnot. We know that is happening behind the scenes, but we don't understand why. And many leaders tend to become ignorant of the fact of these things that are happening. And I'm 100% positive that all the leaders that are in the UN and wherever else in the world, they all know that climate change is real. But because of these factors, they have to play a different role. And ignorance is not bliss. It is injustice. Inaction is not detrimental, it is fatal. Because lives have been lost, lives are being lost, and lives will be lost if we keep continuing being the way we are right now. And so these are the messages, two of the messages that stood forth for me that I took very personally from our discussions with our youth just a bit while ago. And thank you for listening.
Wow, I have competition. So two of the issues that I found were brought up by the young people in the room today. And I'm glad that we're sharing back what happened in that room. I know John Kerry and Antigua thought it was a very important discussion and felt that it was brought up that youth voice wasn't being heard. And even though we were striking, it still wasn't becoming into action, and people weren't making much of a difference or really listening to what we were saying. And I do believe that John Kerry and Antigua heard that today. And I think the biggest message we can get from this is that youth voice goes beyond a photograph or a newspaper article or a quote or anything of the above. It's about us engaging. It's about looking at how we looked at it through the gender lens and like we have before, and engaging us, because we deserve a seat at the table, and at the moment the door is being shut in our face. And I think all of the youths today felt that way coming into that room, and they wanted their voice heard, and we were given the opportunity, and we are grateful, but we want more. We want to be there at every meeting, at every discussion, at every decision making, because at the end of the day, it's our future in your hands, and we aren't asking, like Selina said, we're demanding. So I think the best thing we can see come out of this is that beyond the summit and beyond the United Nations Climate Change, Climate Action Summit in New York, is that we start to believe and evolve when it comes to youth voice and engage us. Because we have a lot to say. One of the most amazing points I thought was brought up was the distance between the public sector and the private sector. Especially here in Ireland, the connection between the two is so distant currently that if they were to be brought together, it could do wonderful things for climate action in particular. Not only, but definitely. The problem with that is we're fighting old policies, old politics, and old legislation that is restricting people from acting and restricting people from protecting. And there is a major gap in between the two of these things. And if we can bring them together, because we are privileged here in Ireland to be able to distance the two and to be able to ignore and not legislate and ignore and take selfies. But there is a reality in what is happening. And there's a reality, and that is lives. And we care about those lives. And now it's time to act upon what we're saying and care. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done, both of you. Thank you. Thanks, Alicia. Thank you. So thank you, Alicia, and thank you, Selina. And you know, I'm so glad to have your voices there for youth. I have a son who's 8 and a daughter who's 11. And every time we talk about there's only a bare 11 years left to 2030. And I explained that to my son, and he says, but I'll still be in school, Mom. And so I have to say that is what has driven me to partner with Madeleine Murray, who's in the crowd, to set up our social enterprise Change by Degrees, because we refuse to leave these problems to the youth to sort out. I refuse to let the 10 years that are coming past. We will make them make a difference for you. I promise that, absolutely. So now we're going to move on to have one more speaker and then our last great panel. So I would like to introduce, please, Mr. Álvaro Mendonça e Moura, and I'm sure I really made a mess out of your name, but who is the Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Portugal. You're most welcome to Cork. There was a recent very successful European Marine Day celebration in Lisbon, and I know that you have passed the baton from Lisbon to Cork, and we look forward so much to carrying on your good work here next year. Thank you. You're very welcome. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, from science to finance, from finance to youth, and I think it's our obligation as diplomats to incorporate these three dimensions, the scientific one, the financial one, and the youth one. And it's because of them that we should really act, and act soon. It's my great pleasure to participate in this summit, and really an honor to be here. The role of islands, and in particularly the one of small island developing states, and the establishment of new and broad partnerships are both crucial for achieving a sustainable governance of the ocean. This is a matter of great importance to my country and one that calls for urgent action. Let me answer straight away one question that's probably in your minds. Why am I here? I'm not coming from a seeds country. The simple and short explanation is this one. Without the ocean, Portugal would not exist. We are independent have been independent now for 9 centuries, but we owe our independence to the ocean. Without the ocean, we would not have been made as a country. So that's the reason why we attach such an importance to the ocean. You cannot explain my country without the ocean. As a maritime nation with a solid presence on the ocean throughout years, we are strongly committed to advancing ocean sustainability and better governance consistent with international law. We are fully aware of the crucial importance of the ocean and its resources. The marine realm is the largest and the most important of Earth's ecosystems, regulates weather patterns, and has been a source of sustenance for humanity over the ages. You know very well it contributes to food security, to poverty eradication. You know better than I do that it provides jobs in the blue economy. It also connects peoples, markets, and cultures. It's a vital element of our general health and thus of our common well-being. And it provides us with extraordinary economic opportunities. Ocean-related productive sectors, we have heard, fisheries, tourism, aquaculture, shipping, you name them, have a major role to play on achieving the economic, social, and environmental dimensions of sustainable development. As we all know, and we have been hearing through the day, ocean and climate are profoundly intertwined with the effects of climate change on marine health, putting at risk the security of coastal and island communities around the globe. But not just of coastal and island communities around the globe, in fact, putting at risk us all. Further, the adverse impacts of climate change on marine ecosystems undermine the ability of countries and societies to adapt and to achieve a sustainable development. But I do recognize that although we are all affected, no other countries are more exposed to an ever-changing climate and more dependent of a healthy and productive ocean than small island developing states. We are well aware that the ocean is a constant presence in your daily life, in your productive systems, in your cultural heritage. But I share that cultural heritage with you. And the degradation of marine ecosystems puts at risk your means of subsistence, your safety, for some, your own existence. And that demands swift answers from the international community. And yet, we are witnessing more intense adverse effects of climate change, particularly on the ocean. The rise in ocean temperature, sea level rise, increasing coastal erosion, decreasing ice coverage in polar regions, extreme weather events, as we have just heard about, just to name the most visible. And these effects show the growing inability of the ocean to regularly perform its vital role in the natural cycles that support life on Earth. On top of that, man-made pressures on marine ecosystems, such as the rising threat of plastic, microplastics have been mentioned, all kinds of marine pollution, overfishing, unreporting and unregulating fishing, also take a serious toll on global marine ecosystems. For all these reasons, and for our past, Portugal was among those countries arguing steadily for a standalone goal for the ocean in the 2030 agenda, as well as making the case for the need of a United Nations conference to support implementation of SDG 14. And you all know, my dear colleagues, namely those that were with me in New York, at the beginning it was not easy. The simple idea that we would have a conference only to deal with the item 14 was opposed by some of the countries present in New York. But through a lot of efforts, the first UN conference was held in 2017. And to my mind, it was a very significant step towards strengthening efforts to reverse the decline of our ocean's health. And we owe a thanks to Fiji and Sweden for having successfully organized that conference. I'm proud to having been instrumental in the preparation of the declaration, Our Ocean, Our Future, Call for Action, where we recognize the importance of the Paris Agreement on climate change and declare the commitment to implement long-term and robust strategies targeting the harmful impacts of climate change on the ocean. Perhaps more important than the call for action, participants had the opportunity to register voluntary commitments for the implementation of Goal 14, with the number of such commitments rising up to 1541 as of today. Better to say, that was 1 week ago. Maybe, I hope, the number of commitments has raised since. But still, there is still a lot to be done. And therefore, time has come for us to look at the future and ensure that we do not fall short of achieving what we have committed in the 2030 agenda and in this first UN Oceans Conference. The dimension of the task at hand demands a global partnership and a collaborative approach. We have to act decisively and urgently because only our collective action will make a meaningful difference to our people. And as Secretary Kerry said, we know what we have to do. It's not that we do not know what we have to do. We know exactly what we have to do, but we have to do it, and to do it now. And it's for that reason that Kenya and Portugal agreed to work together to host the second UN conference in 2020. And after a period of thorough consultations with the wider UN membership, as you know, the General Assembly decided to convene the second UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon in June next year. This decision marks a renewed mobilization of efforts to support implementation of SDG 14. The 2020 conference, whose proposed theme is scaling up ocean action based on science and innovation for the implementation of Goal 14, stock-taking, partnerships, and solutions, will seek to build on the outcomes of the first conference. But let me make an appeal to the importance of synergies and to the importance of the establishment of partnerships to further improve the implementation of SDG 14. I was very impressed to hear yesterday, during another gathering, one of the ambassadors present here, let me name him, was the ambassador of Fiji, telling us how in 24 hours, $1 billion was erased out of Fiji due to an extreme weather event. And we knew what was happening. We knew what happened there. The press was there. Photographs were there. It was easy for a while to mobilize the help. But when the photographs left, when the press left, and they had to make the calculations, they got basically 1/5 of what they needed. And what they needed just because of an extreme weather event. That's what we're talking about. That's the reality. I was really very impressed. I think this is a vivid example that we ought to convey. Ladies and gentlemen, it's very important to highlight the importance of the partnership policy that the island nations are using to address the structural and external challenges they are facing. Also as an example to follow. It's truly remarkable to see how 37 seats and 20 non-UN members, associated members of regional commissions connected through the ocean, are using the potential of partnerships to amplify the positive effects of collaborative action. The third International Conference on Seeds, held in Samoa in 2014, was successful in identifying nearly 300 partnerships that are now monitored through a partnership platform. The Seeds accelerated modalities of action pathway, the Samoa Pathway. This year, the UN General Assembly will convene in September a one-day high-level event to review progress made on Samoa Pathway. Given that the keyword for us is action, we expect a concise, action-oriented, intergovernmentally agreed, but effective political declaration. I'm proud to say that as a contribution from our side, we held in Lisbon this May the 2019 edition of the Oceans Meeting, an event where we addressed major issues such as the challenges of ocean governance for the seas, and counted with the participation of several of their high-level representatives. Dear friends, leaving no one behind and reaching the most vulnerable first is the motto of the 2030 Agenda. It urges us to give priority of action to those countries that are more vulnerable and facing development challenges which require global solutions. The implementation of SDG 14 demands a truly multi-stakeholder approach to seek out concrete solutions for capacity building, trade, finance, and development cooperation that accelerate action for social development, environmental preservation, and the economic growth of all states. Let me conclude by saying that we are fully committed to a game-changing conference in Lisbon next year, notably by scaling up ocean action through science and innovation. But let's preach to the non-converted. We are preaching here to the converted. We have to go out and preach to the non-converted. And the Secretary Kerry said it. We can do it. We can do it. And it's very important to convey to the non-converted that first it is possible to do it, and that the dream is something that can come true. We have to put forward a dream, not really a nightmare. The nightmare is what we are living, and most of you are living. The dream is what we want to be living in the future. Our current global challenges demand an urgent common answer, and that's why we are looking forward to welcoming all of you at the highest possible level at the 2020 Ocean Conference in Lisbon next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary General. Thank you. Can we wish you a happy National Day? I just found out. Thank you, Ambassador Rocha from Cabo Verde. So we wish you a great National Day. We certainly love enjoying ours here, and I'm sure we are keeping you away from Portugal on a day that would be lots of fun.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. For our final panel, I would like to invite on stage, first of all, Ambassador Aubrey Webson, who's the permanent representative of Antigua and Barbuda to the United Nations. You're very welcome, Ambassador Webson. Also, Peter Thomson, UN Special Envoy on the Ocean. Peter, you're very welcome. And Geraldine Byrne Nason, who is Ireland's permanent representative to the United Nations. You're all very welcome to join the panel. I thought I might start with you, Ambassador Webson. For me, the experience that you've been through in Antigua and Barbuda in 2017 with Hurricane Irma and how it literally tore down the middle of your two islands of Antigua and Barbuda, flattening poor Barbuda, and meaning that you now have both the population of Barbuda and Antigua living together in Antigua and trying to, restructure and rehabilitate your whole nation, your islands. I think that's perhaps a story that we in Ireland need to reflect on and learn from, that this amazing resilience that you're showing in the face of these extreme events and how you cope with that and how you pick yourselves back up and what then your aspirations are for rebuilding and ensuring your resilience into the future.
Thank you very much. Let me begin by also first saying thanks to the really gracious hosts, Geraldine and the Minister and the people of Cork for hosting us this weekend and over the last couple of days. It's been a real pleasure to be here, and we truly felt at home, and there is a synergy, there is a feeling between Ireland and the Caribbean islands, and certainly my own. And the reception we have received is nothing but a Caribbean reception. Thank you. I would answer your question with three quick points. The first has to do with the challenge that hurricanes like Irma poses to the Caribbean and to Antigua and Barbuda. In our quest for development, one hurricane that sweeps through the island one night can totally destroy and set us back many years. As you would know, when Hurricane Irma went through Antigua and Barbuda, in July of 2017, Antigua and Barbuda had so-called graduated, meaning that we had achieved a level of economic development that we were no longer able to receive concessionary aid and assistance because we were good. We were too rich to be poor and yet too poor to be rich. Hurricane Irma came in September, and as a result, we were set back. Barbuda, for the first time in 400 years, every single person on that island had to be evacuated. And Antigua became the home to the 2,000 plus Barbudans, and the children, and the Antigua government and budget totally went south, if you might. So to that respect, development in our countries are challenged by the environment, and the environment can immediately change. Living in this environment can change our development aspirations. As one economist in the Caribbean puts it, we borrow every year to rebuild, and we borrow on top of the monies we have borrowed to rebuild again. Very quickly, I would also say that the blue economy and the oceans, and Barbudans felt it most at that time because their entire community life is based on the sea. Barbuda is below sea level. And we lost all of the fishing, all of the sea life that year, and the ability for individuals to be able to use the sea. We're rebuilding, and the reconstruction is taking place through partnerships, which is the third point. The partnerships that we require and that the blue economy affords us is important to SIDS, it is important to Antigua and Barbuda. We want and must have partnerships that allows our nations to be able to join with nations like Ireland and others in order for us to rebuild. We're not asking, as my brother from Fiji put it, we are not stretching for handout. As my prime minister put it in 2017, we are not coming cap in hand. We are working together. And the oceans and this new opportunity in the blue economy allows this partnership. I'll make one last point, as it was made earlier. In 2016, Antigua and Barbuda led the world. We became the first island, the first nation in Latin America and the Caribbean to ban plastic in 2016. We put the ban on single-use plastic. But we recognize that our ban on single-use plastic, we can ban single-use plastic, but the damage to the environment in Antigua is not, the plastics don't stay up north or around south. The plastic moves, and therefore we decided that we had to join an appeal to the rest of the world. And 2 weeks ago, we organized the first international, what we call Play It Out concert, awareness concert on plastic to engage youths. We had 10,000 Antiguans in the stadium, but millions of people looking on social media, Instagram, Snapchats, and whatever, looking at the Play It Out concert, where we invited a number of international stars from Africa, Australia, Europe, to sing and to share with the youths and bring the message to clean up the environment and stop the use of single-use plastic. In my country, if you land at the airport with a plastic bag, it's confiscated. It's taken away. That's how serious we are about the ban on plastic. So our partnership, joining the rest of the world and coming together, is part of the effort for us to remove and beat plastic and to clean up our environment. My friend here, Peter, knows that even the hotels in Antigua have joined and are forced to be part of that with our tourism effort towards banning plastic. I remember Peter saying to me 2 years ago in Antigua, how did you get them to stop using straws? The fact is, this is where size is important. In a small island, you do get people to cooperate much easier than a large island. So sometimes small is also beautiful.
Thank you so much. And I mean, I just admire your resilience as a nation. If we experienced what you experienced with hurricanes one after another, we would use that as an excuse. We would say, well, we can't do it now this year, we'll have to put it off for another 2 years. And you're not putting things off, you're still striving forward despite the fact that you have to rebuild Barbuda from the bottom up. And that is really, I find that incredibly inspirational. And it just means there is no room for excuses. There is no reason for any of us to have excuses. But partnership obviously has been key and will continue to be key. And Ambassador Geraldine and Ambassador Lois will be working very closely together, co-chairing the steering committee on partnerships for SIDS, and that is going to be really important in reviewing what is happening in terms of partnerships that are working to promote sustainable development in SIDS and what more needs to be done. Ambassador Lois Young, what do you want to change? What do you want to become different as you chair this process and you look to upscale the level of ambition around partnerships for SIDS?
Thank you very much. And first, also, like Aubrey, I'd like to say thanks to the Government of Ireland and to Geraldine for having us here. This is an amazing conference. I've learned so much from the speakers that came before. Concerning partnerships, well, partnerships is the goal 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals, partnerships. And when Ireland and Belize were appointed the co-facilitators of the SID Steering Partnership Committee, we wanted to move along the partnership relationship much more than it had been going on, because the SIDS Partnership Steering Committee was inaugurated after the Samoa Pathway, which was in 2015. It was mandated by the Samoa Pathway that there should be this steering committee steered by one developed country and one developing country. We wanted to move it along, and so there had been established a platform for partnerships to be registered. So the first thing that we asked for, or the membership actually asked for, was that an analysis should be done of the partnerships that had been registered. There's no way to analyze a partnership if it hasn't been registered. So we did the analysis, and we found out from the analysis that there was a dearth of partnerships in the areas of gender, youth empowerment, economic partnerships, and there was a preponderance of partnerships in climate change. We also discovered that most of the partnerships, the majority, were in the Pacific Islands and less partnerships in the Caribbean region. So we have now embarked on the SIDS, the SMART criteria, and we've had several meetings where we try to analyze and discuss amongst our members exactly what you mean by a partnership, because that has to be understood by the proponents in this whole thing. And we've now come up, well, there's the SMART criteria, which means that your partnerships should be SID specific. SMART is the acronym, S-M-A-R-T. SMART, S for SID specific. 2, measurable and can be monitored. 3, it should be achievable, accountable. 4, it should be resourced and results-based. And 5, it should be timely and have transparency. And what we've done at the UN, when we have our partnership meetings, we want to make sure that not only the SIDS members attend, but that our partners attend, so that we're not talking to ourselves. That is very important, and that they can understand from the dialogue that's going on what it is that we need to be done in our different jurisdictions to advance the Samoa Pathway. I know I'm using terms that probably people don't know, but I think the previous speaker, ambassador from Portugal, explained the Samoa Pathway. It's SAMOA, and it was adopted in Samoa, but it actually stands for the SIDS Accelerated Modalities of Action. And so it sets out what the priorities are for SIDS. So we're hoping that by having these dialogues at the United Nations with SIDS and with our developed partners, that they can understand and what it is that the SIDS need to implement their priorities as set out in the pathway. And the main thing that has come to light is we need capacity building, and we need a financial vehicle dedicated to SIDS to allow us to access finance to carry out our plans for development.
Thank you, Ambassador. And Ambassador Geraldine, Byrne, Nason, in working then together on partnerships, what for you are some of the core elements that need to change that are arising, and how is that also reflected in the work then you're doing in engaging communities, citizens and youth in preparation for the Secretary General's Climate Summit? Is there a confluence there?
Well, in fact, there isn't really a conflict. There's a great coherence in a way, and that Ireland has luckily found itself in 3 different sets of negotiations at the UN, we call it co-facilitation, that are all really building up to a climax in September this year. So at one level, it's a sort of a bumper year. So we're working year-round with Lois on the SIDS partnership strategy, but then we're also going to open the General Assembly week this year, working with our colleagues from the Marshall Islands as part of that Coalition for Climate Action. If I could just briefly go back to Selina and Alicia's excellent recapture of the discussion this morning, to say that we're really working there on making sure, I think one thing that came through from both of them now was that they're fed up being included in photo ops, and that they've had enough tokenism and talk about the future. This is really the reality now. And so what we want to do is to move this discussion into not just inclusive rhetoric in a way, but to include them on the stage during the summit. So we will have a weekend before that summit begins with the Youth Friday for Action, which I think will be an extraordinary one in New York this year. And we will engage with them in that. Here in Ireland, I think it's important that politicians have gone onto the streets. We expect to have politicians with us in New York on Friday, and then spend a weekend of working with youth through what they will bring to the table as a summer of solutions, a weekend of discussion that will be intergenerational. Mary Robinson hopefully will come with members of the elders. I think that's an important message, that people who are wise and listening to them are actually coming into the Youth Summit, and we will then bring them onto the stage on Monday. And one thing there that Ireland is doing, it was a point raised, I think, by Alicia today, is that we plan to ask the leaders at the summit not just to sit and listen, but to actually act, so to pledge individually that they will engage with youth in the design of environment policies going forward. And one of the practical actions there is that we will try to build a momentum across bringing youth into parliaments globally, starting in Ireland, moving into the European Parliament. So I think it was great we had Mairead McGuinness here today, and hopefully in New York making a plan of action over a period of time to have youth in parliaments discussing. So that's one action, one element rather of our engagement. The second, and I'll conclude with this, is that the week really builds up to a unique moment. We actually have a SID summit, which we haven't had before, and it's an opportunity to shine a light specifically on where we are politically, as well as in terms of the achievement of many of the aspects that we've discussed here for the last 2 days, in fact. Those negotiations are being co-chaired by Fiji and Ireland, and you already heard today from Ambassador Satyendra about some of the issues that are of concern, but I might just say that 4 things about those negotiations. The import, Lois just used a term there that I think is really important, that it's not SIDS talking to SIDS, and it can't be Fiji, Ireland, and the SIDS getting together for a summit. We want this to be the UN as a whole. So we are working very hard to make sure that this is a politically astute declaration that we produce at the end of the week, that it's something that speaks way beyond the agenda of those who are just at the heart of bearing the brunt of these issues, and that we will have sign-on from every single head of state and government who attends the UN in the General Assembly week, who attends several summits, but who will be there also for the SID summit. And President Higgins has agreed to come and to co-host that summit with Fiji. The issues of substance that are now emerging, and our negotiations are still well underway, there are, of course, many. I'll highlight 4 quickly. The first, an obvious one, in a way the usual suspect, the question of water. Certainly an issue that unites not just access to water and SIDS challenged existentially by what water does to their islands, but also this includes countries in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, in terms of drought, the quest for desalination and water, not just in SIDS, but also in many, many parts of Africa, an issue that's shared across the globe. Disaster and resilience, another issue that will be front and centre in the declaration. The building back better. We've heard just from Aubrey now the extraordinary challenge in a single or 2 islands in a single country, where building back better is just an extraordinary challenge. So we will focus on that. The third, and probably the knottiest issue, I think, in the negotiations will be finances. We've heard lots about that in the course of the last few days. We need to treat this with, I think, the deep seriousness we've heard today and in the discussions. One, on the question of access, the fact being that many of the countries, Aubrey made a very poetic way there of saying it, who are now too rich to be poor or too poor to be rich, that countries who need access to finance are not in a position to access them. And I think very importantly in the negotiations, now we need to highlight that there are actual institutional structural problems in the Bretton Woods institutions and in the UN system as a whole in terms of giving the countries who need access to that, whether it's the Green Climate Fund or disaster relief, credit risk financing. We have a big job of work to do there. And then the final issue that will, I think, be given a great degree of importance and should be, is that the UN, as we know it, the UN in New York in particular, isn't equipped to manage the implementation of any of these issues that we in these negotiations agreed to. We need to seriously look at the capacity within the UN to be SID specific in the way they respond to political decisions that are taken. So that's a flavour of what we're doing. We're very optimistic. We think we'll have a great declaration, and we're also going to preface that great declaration with a fantastic Fijian Irish party on Thursday night before we get down to the business of Friday. So there you are.
I always find a good party helps get a good declaration. So good luck with that. I think it's so important what you were talking about, this genuine giving voice to and listening to the voices of those that are most affected. And that is young people, it is women, it is grassroots communities, it's people with disabilities, it's the voices from communities in small island developing states and LDCs. And the more we take that time to listen to those voices, I think the stronger and more powerful all of our collective actions will be. Peter, you've been really patient. Waiting all day, and it's lovely to welcome you here and to have you here as UN Special Representative or UN Envoy on the Oceans. Selina said a short while ago that there is no justice without action, and your job is to be an advocate for action for the oceans around the world. As you are on those travels and as you're here today listening, what are your priorities? What do you want to most light a fire under the world's leaders to get them to do differently?
Well, I'm really glad I came here this afternoon because I picked up some very important information. I just want to check what the date was. That Fiji Irish party?
Yeah. You're invited.
You're organising it.
Okay,
where and when is that party? I want to be there. Yeah. What do we need to do, folks? I mean, you've heard it all today. Senator Kerry pointing out to us that we're heading towards a 3.7 degree world. The predicament being that as IPCC, the collection of the world's best scientists, have told us that when we get to 2 degrees, there's no more coral. And if sitting here in Cork, that might not seem important, but let me put it this way. Coral is 30% of the biodiversity of the ocean is in coral reefs. Take that out of the picture, which it seems we're going to this century because we're still tracking towards 3.7 degrees, and the corals are gone at 2 degrees. Take coral reefs and all that biodiversity out of the ocean, and tell me that you're not irreparably damaging the ocean ecosystem, and I just wouldn't be able to see your logic. So if we are irreparably damaging the ocean's ecosystem by that kind of future, we're obviously going to irreparably damage the global ecosystem, which means that we ourselves are going to be put at great jeopardy. And when I say we ourselves, I mean the future of the human species. So, we are intimately linked with what's going on, folks. Everything is connected. If coral reefs are dying, we are dying as a species too. Now that sounds pretty depressing, I know, but I'm a big optimist. Sorry, I hate that word optimist and pessimist. I'm a dyed-in-the-wool, hard-nosed pragmatist. That's what we all got to be, pragmatists. And when people say, well, how do you go to sleep without being depressed each night? My answer is that ever since our species walked out of East Africa and set up the great agricultural projects that we did in the Fertile Crescent and went on from there to, well, industrialization in Europe and places like that. And, we sent rockets up to the moon and out into space and all the amazing technological stuff which we know how to do today. What were the 2 great strengths that got us on that amazing journey? It was our ability to share with each other, because that's what societies are based on, and that's how economies develop and technologies develop. So our ability to share with each other. And secondly, our incredible powers of innovation and invention. So why, at the time of our greatest existential crisis, which is climate and ocean change in the 21st century, would we not step up those abilities of ours to the highest possible levels that we've got, to share better and to innovate better? And I think that is what's going to happen, and you can already see the great ideas that are coming forth on things like plastic pollution and on renewable energy, to know that, we're going to get there. But we're not going to get there if it's business as usual and sitting back. So I guess the second point that I would make then is that how are we going to get there in terms of the changes that are necessary? Well, it's already been said by the IPCC. We have to make radical changes to our consumption and production patterns. And we put it in there in the Sustainable Development Goals, SDG 12. Radical changes to our consumption and production systems. Now, Senator Kerry was talking this morning about political will and how we as individuals are voters who can change governments. That's very true. But we are also individual human beings who are consumers who are making everyday choices. And I don't want to preach the converted, I don't want to preach the unconverted, but I would say to you this: you all have personal choices to make in that radical move in consumption and production, which is going to be necessary if our grandchildren and theirs are going to have the future that we want for them. I'll just conclude with a very simple example of what that might be. I'm not saying you should do this, but my wife and I were sitting in New York 3 or 4 years ago, and I'd just read a very dismal report on what beef and was doing to the planet in terms of water consumption and greenhouse gases and all the rest. And there was a graph, I'm sure you've seen it. Beef is way out here, lamb is about here, pork and chicken and fish are down over here. And we looked at that, and there happened to be a photograph of our 3 granddaughters on the table. And my wife said, "Do you love those 3 girls more than you love beef?" And that was it. We decided there and there we would never have beef again in our lives, and we haven't. That was about 4 years ago. It's easy, folks. It's easy. I haven't owned a car for 20 years. If somebody came to me and said, here's a brand new Tesla, it's electric, I said, but why would I want one of those things? You've got to insure them, you've got to park them, all sorts of things. There's public transport outside you can get on, or you can walk. And those are sort of personal choices that you can make that are the radical changes from what we were born into and what we were brought up as being the thing that middle-class people should aspire to, or should, in fact, carry on with. So I think those are sort of a couple of messages I'd leave.
No, and I think, it's when you say things like, it gets to 2 degrees, we lose all of our coral. I mean, I don't understand why we're not all jumping up and down, screaming no. And I admire, on an everyday basis, the diplomatic skills of our colleagues from the small island states, that you don't go into the UN every day and just kick and scream and shout at everybody until they listen to you. I admire so much that you remain diplomatic, you use the skills that you have when all inside of you must be wanting to shout and scream at everybody and go, we can't let this happen. But it should also be what pushes us on and encourages us to do more. And I think we've had so many examples today of where people have just got on with it. They haven't waited around to get the policy perfect. They just implemented a policy where you didn't wait around for someone to come and help you out. You didn't wait for the international community to turn up on your doorstep. You got on with it yourself. And I think that's what I need to hear anyway, in the face of, really the existential threats that we face as humanity. We haven't got a lot of time left, but what I thought I would like to do is, and I'm going to go to Geraldine first because you're the hostess, so I can be crueler to you than everybody else, is to give us 3 words that are your takeaways from today, and they should be hopeful. 3 hopeful words, thinking back on the day. So the rest of you get time to think about it. Geraldine doesn't get any, but she's a very accomplished diplomat.
I would say sincere, passionate, determined.
Very good. Sincere, passionate, and determined. Yeah, and I think that will shape Ireland's relationship with small island states. This is a beginning and going to go much further.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Are you ready, Lois?
Can I use more than 3 words? No?
No more than 5. No more than 5.
SIDS have friends.
Ah, yeah.
SIDS have friends.
That's 3.
SIDS
That's great.
have friends.
As long as we keep the acronym and don't say small island developing states have friends. That's good. Yes, and I think Ireland is very pleased to be among your friends, and I think we've seen in the stories that we have exchanged that there is an awful lot that we all have in common, and that's great. Ambassador Webson, wise words I feel are coming.
I guess I would. My 3 words would be. Today I heard, like Geraldine, really determination. I also said to the minister, it seems to me that I feel that we're getting together and partnership. Determination, togetherness, and partnership.
Great, yeah, and I think at the heart of that partnership is the promise that the small island states have made here to hold us as a nation accountable for what we have said in the last few days that we will do together and that we will partner together. And I think that holding us to account is most welcome. Peter, you get the last 3 words.
Well, Aubrey's already stolen my main one, which is partnership. I think, together we can do this, as I've already emphasized. That's what the first one would be, partnership. The second one would be science. We've got the UN Decade for Science coming up. When you're sick, you go to the doctor. Who's the ocean going to go to? It's going to go to the marine scientists. So that science is going to be the really important thing for the ocean. And the last one I'd say is innovation, again, echoing what I said earlier, because I really do think we are going to innovate and invent the solutions to these enormous problems that we're facing.
Great, thank you. And I think at the beginning of the day, Secretary Kerry reminded us that climate change is I won't say man-made, I'll say human-made, a human-made problem. But it is certainly a problem to which we as humanity hold the solutions, and that applies to the management of our oceans, to our land, to how we engage our people in our communities and take them with us on this journey. But certainly we should not be wasting any more time in getting on with it. And to go back to what Selina said, injustice is no action, and justice requires action, and I think that's what we can all pledge to do in whatever way, in our personal lives, as you said, in the work that we do, and that would be a tangible change we can all make. So I would like to thank our panelists. Thank you very much.